Planning Commission for 28 September to order. Jennifer, could you please do a roll call vote and let people out there know how they can get in touch with us?
Yes, definitely. First, our chair Dawson is absent today. Vice Chair Bluth,
Here.
Commissioner Brassfield,
Present.
Commissioner Fletcher,
Here.
Commissioner Freeman,
Here.
Commissioner Latassa. Also absent. He might be here late, so
There
if
he is.
There.
Oh, Commissioner Latassa is here. Okay. Present, and then Commissioner Silva.
I'm here.
Perfect. Thank you. That is a total of 6 members today, meaning we do have a quorum. And for staff, we have Planning Manager Hill, Associate Planner Buggert, and myself, Recording Secretary Cleary. And as for members of the public, we do encourage members of the public to join our meetings via Zoom Gov, a secure service that connects you live with no lag time. This meeting is also streamed live on youtube.com/City of Monterey with a 10-second delay and Comcast channel 25 with up to a 90-second delay. If you'd like to provide public comment, please join the meeting using Zoom or by telephone, making sure to join in time to accommodate delays. To join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. Since the meeting has begun, you'll find the agenda under the Recent tab. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864 toll free. Once again, that phone number to call is 833-568-8864 toll free. Then enter the webinar ID 161-990-8039. Once again, the webinar ID for this meeting is 161-990-8039. If the first phone number doesn't work, please try another. There are more listed on the meeting agenda at isearchmonterey.org. If prompted for a participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions for using Zoom are available at monterey.org/public meetings. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. Public commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak. Please turn off TV or computer speakers or go to another room while connected, as background noise interferes with the broadcast. Public speakers will be called upon in order of hands raised. There's a 3-minute time limit for today's meeting. Please stay within that limit. That's all I've got. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jennifer. Looks like let's open the consent agenda. Looks like we've only got the minutes from the September 12th meeting on that. Does anybody have any questions about the minutes or want to pull an item on the consent agenda? I don't see anybody. Jennifer, anybody online?
I see no hands raised online.
Great. Do we have a motion on the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Great.
Second.
So we have a first and a second. Jennifer, could you please do a roll call vote for that?
Sure can. Chair Dawson is absent. Vice Chair Bluth,
Yes.
Commissioner Brassfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Fletcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Latassa,
Yes.
Commissioner Silva.
Yes.
Thank you. These minutes are approved as submitted.
Thank you. Does anybody have any comments to make that are not on the agenda tonight? I don't see anybody. Jennifer, anybody online?
There are no hands raised online.
Okay, let's close the consent agenda and move on to the first public appearance item, which is consider 875 Spencer Street application for H2 historic zoning, TM 23-9193, application owner Michael D. Logan and Heidi D. Logan, R35 rezoning district, medium density residential general plan use designation exempt from CEQA per Article 19, Section 1530 S or 5, Class 5. I guess, Matthew, do you have a presentation for us?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I will share my screen. Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Buggert, and I'm an associate planner with the City of Monterey's Planning Division. Today, we're here to talk about 875 Spencer Street, applying for H2 rezoning. The recommendation from staff is that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution to recommend to City Council that they adopt an ordinance to rezone the property as City Historic Resource from R35 to R35H2. The subject property is in the northwestern part of the city along Spencer Street. There's a primary dwelling and a garage in the back. For some background on the project, an intensive survey was prepared by architectural historian Kent Seavey, and this property qualifies as a local historic resource under California Register Criteria 3, which is for design. The resource falling under this criteria embodies a distinctive characteristic of a type, period, region, or method of construction, usually associated with architecture. The design itself for the Henry Linares house is eligible under this design criteria as an example of art modern architecture and retains all 7 aspects of integrity. Which are detailed here: location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. This is a front-on view of the house with the art modern architecture. And a little bit of background on the architect himself. He was an owner builder of the residence, likely from a pattern book. And there's a similar house nearby at 739 Belden Street. He was a carpenter and plasterer. The art modern style evolved from Art Deco and then into streamlined modern over the decade of the 1920s to the 1940s, leading into the house itself. The curved lines and porthole front are all aspects of the house itself. Character defining features of the property include box-like rectangular building envelope, a flat roof, textured stucco surfaces, modern geometric decorative finishes, and aerodynamic curves. Some additional background on this project. This project was brought before the HPC, Historic Preservation Commission, and their recommendation in July was that they recommend Planning Commission today recommend to City Council that they adopt an ordinance to rezone the property. And with that, the property itself meets the eligibility requirements for H2 overlay zoning and the Mills Act program, in that the property has been identified by a qualified architectural historian to be a significant local historic resource, and granting the contract will serve to offset the cost of maintaining the resource. With that, the recommendation from staff is that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution to recommend City Council rezone the property as an H2 local city historic resource. That concludes staff's presentation. We also have with us today the applicant, and I also believe the historian.
Mhm. Thanks, Matthew. Anybody have any questions for Matthew?
Thank you, Matthew. Couple of questions. First off, in our packet, we have a photograph of the 875 Spencer Street house, but it differs from what we just saw on the screen in that the paint scheme is different and the front door is different and the windows are different. I was wondering, I didn't write it out there. Can you explain which is the most current version?
The most current version is the red, the updated version. This image that's included in the staff report was from the DPR, the original historic report that was made for it. And there is very little difference from the architectural historian viewpoint.
Can you explain what feeling means in relationship to one of the 7 aspects of determining the historic nature of this?
I can, but I think somebody who would give a more a qualified description of feeling would be the architectural historian who's here today.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Matthew. Would the applicant or would Kent Seavey like to make a presentation?
Good afternoon. It's good to see so many both qualified and friendly faces. The building is one of two Art Deco buildings, residences in our collection of houses in Monterey. They're wonderful. They're right out of a pattern book. The only change that was made to this house prior to its, well, within the context of the Preservation Commission, was their concern about a fan window. That is a thing that concerns me as well. And so we got rid of the fan window, and currently now you have a much closer deco form in the window. It's right in its geometry, but it fits the building much better. And they were also wondering about the colors as they were fading. All the trim is in wood. So this guy, Linares, and his brother, the only difference between the two buildings is if you looked at the speed lines around the porthole, the brothers are on the other side. But they probably they were built within a year of each other. They probably built them together. And I defy you to find a deco building of the quality of the single family residence anywhere on the Monterey Peninsula. That's all I'd have to say, unless you have a question. The feeling is feeling an association with the nature of the building itself and its position in the context of the neighborhood and the neighborhood built up around it. So you have different types of building and the like. There's, it's a nice tooth in the middle of the rest of that stuff.
So feeling is another
It's,
word for context.
well, in the context of the neighborhood association and feeling.
I'm still not following what a building is an inanimate
Well, it's an
object.
inanimate object, but it gives you a sense of time and place. Feeling and association. And this gives you a sense of feeling and association with the period of construction and the individuals in question who decided to make.
Now I understand, because the language in the report says that the building retains its feeling, which I thought was a rather strange way of saying something, because buildings don't have feelings. But now I understand what
Sure.
the issue.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not about the buildings, but what it conveys.
Yeah, and we architectural historians tend to think they do. Any other questions, sir?
Anything in the historic context with this eyebrow and lashes on the porthole?
Oh, those are very typical of the design style.
But that's my question. Is there anything in that reference that would apply to that it should show or depict the construction of the building itself?
Well, speed lines were introduced. Moderne moved from Art Deco to streamline moderne, and it was the architect's answer to wind passing by. The trains, the buses, all of this speed and movement forward.
I think it
And-
adds character, but
Yeah, that's character, but it's very typical of the form.
thank you.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Kent. Nice report. I think of modern as being 1930s, so this must be the very tail end, one of the last
You
examples.
have to understand what's going on. We had this little problem called World War II. And all the pattern books went up to about 48. I've got several. And the pattern books had what you could have in them. So World War II comes along. At the end of the conflict, by 47, 48, you're getting in that time. Where do you go? You go to what's available. And these guys liked it. The Linares brothers are workers. And they love that design. And it worked for them. It was the right size and it had character. So they chose it. You go to 51, 52, 53, you'll find some of those as well in the next body of information to come out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Dan?
Yeah, Kent, what do you think the original color scheme was like?
I have no idea, but I suspect because of the use of wood in the speed lines, that it was a separate color. And I don't know. Mike, did you find any kind of color below? It was blue.
Did they have like an
also green.
So it was blue, then it was green. But blue would be obvious because where are we? We're adjacent to the ocean. Again, these are working stiffs who put this thing together.
What do you think the front door would have looked like on the original?
Hmm?
What do you think the front door would have looked like on the original?
Well, I gave them I gave the family a page of about 28 period doors from the 48 document.
Great.
And we went through them and made selection of that predicated on the several examples that were used for deco.
Okay, thank you.
Sandy, do you have a question? Okay, thanks very much, Kent.
Thank you.
So does anybody in the audience have a question? Anybody online, Jennifer?
I see no hands raised online.
Great. Well, then, any discussion on the item?
I'm in support of approving this item. And it's funny how such a plain little stucco box can be so enriched and by such simple details. It's really, it's an amazingly sort of elegant bit of architecture to be able to achieve that.
Dan?
It's straightforward. I'm quite in support of this.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see it is pretty much intact.
It'd be interesting if the other one on Belden Street comes up for historic approval. It is a little more colorful, at least the Google Maps, tan with, turquoise speed lines, et cetera. But that would make twin sisters in the same neighborhood. Totally in support.
I'm in support of this project. I love this term speed lines. And it's funny that that would be something that somebody think would apply to a house that is not moving. It's a marvelous little modest stucco box, and Terry's right. It's amazing what just a little bit of decoration does. In this case, it brings it to historic status. So it's a benign project, and I'll vote for it.
Mike?
No.
I think it's a wonderful house. I drove by it before the meeting started. I think you guys did a wonderful job going ahead and putting the effort into restoring that property. And I support it as well. So do we have a motion?
Yes, move to recommend city council adoption of an ordinance rezoning the property at 875 Spencer Street from R35 to R35H2. Is that right? Do I have that right?
That's right.
Okay, from R35 to R35H2 historic zoning.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Super. Jennifer, could you please do a roll call vote?
Yeah, Chair Dawson is still absent. Vice Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Commissioner Brassfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes,
Commissioner Latassa,
Yes.
Commissioner Silva.
Yes.
Thank you. This motion carries, and it's not appealable because it's already going to the council. But it is approved at the planning commissioner level.
Well, congratulations. Welcome to the Monterey family of historic homes.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is consider 591 Larkin Street, application for H2 historic zoning, TM 23-0143, applicant John Snooks and owner Liam O'Brien et al. R36 zoning district, medium density residential general plan land use designation exempt from CEQA per Article 19, Section 153 05 Class 5. And Matthew, can we have your presentation, please?
Before Matthew gets started, just for the record, to reflect, it is 581 Larkin. Yep, no problem.
Yes, I will share my screen.
Thanks, Matthew.
In a moment. All right. My name is Matthew Buggert, and I'm an associate city planner with the City of Monterey's Planning Division. And we are here today to also talk about 581 Scott Street. Also regarding H2 rezoning at today's Planning Commission meeting. The recommendation from staff is that the Planning Commission adopt resolution to recommend to City Council that they adopt an ordinance to rezone the property from R36 to R36H2. The subject property is in the middle of town, just up from downtown. It's stretched between Larkin Street and Van Buren Street along Scott Street. Some background on this project. An intensive survey was prepared by architectural historian Meg Clovis, and it qualifies as a local historic resource based on California Register criteria 1 and 2, as opposed to 3 of the previous one. Criterion 1 is under event, that it is associated with an event that made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history, and especially as a city resource, it has to do with local history. And criterion 2, person, that the property is associated with individuals that are significant or exceptional to, in this case, the city of Monterey. The Frank Helm House is eligible under the event criterion because it is representative of residential development in Lower Old Town during the last quarter of the 19th century. The property retains 6 of the 7 aspects of integrity. The one that is not included is workmanship. There is no physical evidence of a specific cultural craftsmanship to the property. It was relatively standard in terms of workmanship. Under person, the Frank Helm House is eligible under this criteria as the family home of Frank Helm. He had several businesses in Monterey, and it is the only building that was owned continuously by the Helm family. One of his stores was at the bottom of the Monterey Hotel. This photo is from 1903, and he's down here. Oh, maybe not him, but his store is down here. This is him on the left at 423 Alvarado Street. And today the Helm Tobacco Shop is related to the same family. And this is the property as it was in around 1905. This is the primary residence here before it had a second story and looks down at the downtown and Bay area. As it stands today, it stretches along this full street here, Scott Street, going from Larkin Street to Van Buren Street. And there are a few additional structures remaining on the property. Some character defining features of the property and specifically the primary house include wood siding with corner boards. It retains its original window and door openings. It includes a brick chimney, an asymmetrical facade with hipped and gabled roofs, a front dormer with hexagonal shingles, gable returns, a shed roof dormer, and a front entrance with a door, surround, and porch. This is as it once stood, and there have been some repairs to the property and updates to have it be a little bit more shiny and restored to its more historic aesthetic. There are 3 additional structures on the site that are included as part of the maintenance and preservation on the property, including an old tobacco warehouse, again, Helm's Tobacco, the masonry wall, of which a portion of it was seen in that stretched image on the left, and a garage on the property as well. Some additional background on this project. This went before the Historic Preservation Commission a couple weeks ago, September 14th, and they recommended that Planning Commission today recommend to City Council that they adopt an ordinance for rezoning. With this, the property meets the eligibility requirements for H2 overlay zoning for a Mills Act program and identified by a qualified architectural historian to be significant. With that, staff's recommendation is that Planning Commission adopt a resolution to recommend to City Council that they adopt rezoning of the property from R36 to R36 H2. And today we have the architectural historian and property owners with us today. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thanks, Matthew. Does anybody have any questions for Matthew?
I have a few.
Okay, Peter, go.
Thanks, Matthew. So a couple of questions. So the wall, the tobacco shed and the barn, do they get the same protections at the main house as far as, it would be very difficult to get a demolition permit for the main house, but would that be exactly the same for the wall and the other structures?
Under the Mills Act program and historic zoning, any updates to the property, including removal of fences, removal of masonry walls, adjustments to existing buildings, would require review through through HPC prior to adjustments on the property.
Okay. It's a huge lot. It's a whole, end of a block. If the owner wanted to subdivide the property in the future, are there any impacts on that from this Mills Act zoning?
I cannot speak to subdividing specifically. Levi may be able to talk to that. The main thing that I go back to is any adjustments to the property would require HPC review.
Sure. Yeah, if something like that were to occur, it's likely that obviously for the Mills Act contract portion, it's for the entire property. It does cover specifically the maintenance schedule of these historic structures. But if something were like a subdivision where, say, one of the accessory structures was now on a different lot, the Mills Act contract would need to be modified at that point. If, say, they were going to do an addition or add structures to the property, that would not necessarily impact the Mills Act contract as long as it didn't significantly or negatively impact the historic structures on the lot.
Okay, I guess what I'm curious about, because the property is very long, east to west. If the eastern half of the property were just severed and it became two different parcels, then the eastern part wouldn't have any structures on it. Would that new parcel then have the H2 zoning as well?
That's an excellent point. It would not if it didn't. Well, it would carry the H2 zoning because the zoning applies to the entire property at this point. That would be something that would possibly be a condition of approval of any type of subdivision at that point to modify the zoning to not include the H2 on the portion that did not retain any historic structures.
Yeah, and it would have the wall as well.
Yeah, and that's something that would probably undergo another evaluation at that point by a historian to see if the wall alone merited the historical significance designation at that point.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Maybe for Levi, that garage, if all of a sudden the owner wanted to convert it to an ADU, would that be a problem?
To convert, without seeing specific plans, it's hard to say, but as just a conversion that would not negatively impact or significantly change the exterior, probably would not be a problem. The ADU ordinance does have specific criteria for ADUs on H1 and H2 zoned properties that typically is in response to a new structure. But as Matthew pointed out, any changes to the existing structures would undergo review from the Historic Preservation Commission. So it would be expected to fall in line with the Secretary of Interior standards. So it would most likely be required to remain historically intact.
Okay.
Thank you. I have one more.
Go ahead. I'm so sorry. We'll cut you off. Okay.
Or again, for Levi, since you have the experience of working somewhere else, and this is state law, I understand that, but unprocessed, is it very similar where you were in Ventura to here?
Specifically to the Mills Act? Yeah, fairly similar. Not all cities have a Mills Act program. It's a kind of a statewide concept. It's for cities to individually adopt the program. But yes, where I previously worked, it's a similar framework.
Thank you.
Sure.
The 3 outbuildings, one of them is not included in this report. It was like a washroom, the garage, the tobacco warehouse, the garage, and then there was a washroom. So that building is not included in this report. If the owner wanted to remove that building, could he do that?
So when it comes to the buildings that are not included in the envelope, which include all the ones that were in the DPR
Yeah.
report. Meg may be able to speak more to that, but they could be removed without impacting the Mills Act or historic preservation there. However, in the case that they did want to be removed, they would need to go through HPC and receive input and review before they removed those things
Okay.
moving forward.
Peter, do you have a question?
I do not.
Thanks very much, Matthew. Would the applicant like to speak?
Good afternoon, Meg Clovis. I'm the historian who worked on this project. Unlike Kent's project, this is not historically significant for its architecture. It's for a person. And Frank Hellum was a really extraordinary businessman here in Monterey. He came here at 19 years old and started a boot black stand, but was able to build up his business, his tobacco business, into the largest tobacco business in the United States. And he also opened a furniture store, a candy store. He owned gas stations. He subdivided the Hellum block. So he was really an extraordinary person who started truly from nothing. He sort of built this house with that same idea in mind because he cobbled it together. He took a little cottage, the hipped roof section from the Hotel Del Monte, and then he sort of hooked it together with that gabled section, put a hallway down the center, and just sort of grew it as his family grew. And so I'm sure you all know that neighborhood. There's plenty of great examples of Queen Anne architecture in that neighborhood. So that's why it didn't rise to that level. But in terms of being an important resource for a historic person, it certainly meets criterion too. So, does anybody have any questions?
I'm curious, how did you figure out that hip roof portion came from the Hotel Del Monte?
That was from the property's been in the family since it was constructed. It was just recently sold. And Dick Hellum, who was the last Hellum associated with the property, did a walkthrough with us, and he knew that. And he knew all about the history. The brick fireplace was built by Frank Hellum's father, who was a brick mason. And he also built that stone wall too, because the house on the corner where there's still some steps, it's across from the Perry house, there's still some steps. That was the Josepha Matthews adobe. And she had taken down the adobe at some time and built a stone house. And when Frank bought the property, he took down that stone house, but his father retained the stone and built that wall. So that's the story behind that.
Yeah, I've always thought that wall was Mexican era.
Yes,
But,
yeah, I did initially too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I would love to hear the owner talk about the plans that he might have for the development of the lot. I see that there's some foundation blocks on it and just much improvement. Just Perhaps you could say a few
Thank you.
words.
Sure. I have one quick question
Okay.
for you, though. I really enjoyed reading your report. I thought it was outstanding.
Mhm.
I'm just curious, you mentioned in the report that the Helm business is the oldest operating business in Monterey.
Mhm.
Is it the oldest operating business in California?
Not in the whole,
State?
actually, I think it may be the
Maybe we
oldest,
should-
yeah, the oldest tobacco. I thought I had that information in here.
Yeah, I think there's some bars up in Groveland that are older.
Older than this. Okay, some tobacco, but it certainly is the oldest continually run business in Monterey by the same family.
Great. Thank you very much. Would the applicant like to come up and talk about the property?
My name is David McLaughlin. I'm also an owner. Name is my brother-in-law, so that's the connection. So the area you see out front, we're going to do a deck out there. That's what that's for. Our intention is to keep all of the outbuildings and fix them basically, and keep them intact. The wash house, the tech room, the barn, and the garage.
It's impressive.
Do you have any plans for the other side of the property on the Van Buren side?
We do not.
Okay.
We are going to hopefully add on to the existing house, and John and Meg have been working on that plan to add 2 bedrooms. That's about it.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for any.
Fascinating project.
It really is.
Mhm.
And we just found out last week that wall apparently was in a movie. Tortilla Flat.
Or what?
Spencer Tracy. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll open it to any public questions. Anybody in the audience have a question or a statement?
Yeah, Steve, not a question, but I would certainly like to honor these people for opening one of the best remaining open spaces in the city of Monterey, tying it to a circle of important historic properties on that Scott Street corner. Well done.
Thanks. Jennifer, anybody online?
I see no hands raised online.
Okay, well, let's bring it back. Any discussion on the item?
Well, I'll start. I'm also in favor of this one being rezoned. I've always admired this property, and it really it's very unusual to see this level of sort of retention of the old outbuildings and the wall and everything. It was just this overgrown mess when they bought it, and really talk about historic resource. It's just the whole place is still basically as it was 120 years ago, pretty much, with little changes, but it's a really unusual. Also, the longevity of the Helm tobacco store in Monterey, the whole thing is just this really unusual retention of historic nature.
Great. Dan?
I'm in support of this project. I agree, to have a piece of property that's pretty much been intact for 100 and some odd years is really quite nice, particularly in that part of town. So I'm going to vote in favor of this.
Sandy?
I drive by this property just about every day, and I am in awe of what has been done to make it come alive, really. The hedging, that you have with the Mexican sage, and then painting the home white, and it's so appealing, and it's huge. I mean, the property is just unbelievable. What you've done is fantastic. So of course I'm in support of it.
Mike?
It's interesting how history plays out in this city. Growing up here, and when the city of Monterey, we had Lower Alvarado, which my parents forbid me to go there. And they also forbid me to go onto Helms because it was a tobacco shop. And so the history of it, and then I found the Helm house, I don't know how long ago, and I always admired just the way it looked. And that wall, I mean, it's like Terry said, it's striking because wait a minute, there's a wall there. we don't have too many walls like that in the city of Monterey. And unless you go to the back of Trader Joe's, that lot, you see that wall, but we don't see too many trees. So I just wanted to comment that I thought this was a very interesting project, and I hopefully you're successful in it. Thank you.
Peter?
One of the benefits of anybody applying for a Mills Act is having a historic report prepared. And I'm always fascinated when I read such reports, especially this one, just an outstanding job. And just all of the kind of the legacy of how this house survived after all this time under one family is pretty amazing and pretty unique in Monterey. I used to frequent Pelham's Tobacco, gotten to know Wyatt quite well over the years. And it's just fascinating to understand the importance of the history of that family and how it relates to the history of Monterey in itself. So I'm in full support of this project and in the rezoning.
It's an iconic property. The wall, I think I agree, is amazing. It's something that really just stands out and gives you the feel of being in Old Monterey. And the history just connects everything from Helm Highway all the way through to the tobacco store and his home. It's just a wonderful thing to see going on the register. I think it's an important step for the city, and thank you for going ahead and bringing it up as a H2 designated property. So can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that the planning commission adopt a resolution recommending city council adoption of an ordinance to rezone the property as an historic resource from District R36 to District R36 H2.
Second?
Second.
Okay, first and second. Jennifer, could you do a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Fletcher, were you the seconder? Okay, thought so. Chair Dawson is still absent. Vice Chair Bluth,
Yes.
Commissioner Brassfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Fletcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Latassa,
Yes.
Commissioner Silva.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries and the vote is, there's 6 votes approving and it is not appealable as this will already be going to the council meeting.
Thank you. And congratulations. And it's a wonderful thing that you're a part of. I think the city of Monterey is on the peninsula, at least, is one of the few cities to really aggressively utilize the H2 program and the Mills Act. And it's great to see more and more properties becoming part of that, protect our historic character of the city and to provide more information to the residents and visitors of the great history that we have here. So thanks
Can
for
I make a
staff on
comment?
that too.
I would love to see the city of Monterey look at. In some cities, they put a pole in front of those historic houses. I would love to see that because eventually we're looking at getting a walking tour of Monterey, which would have either someone in a narrative explain the history of that site or a pamphlet that laid it out. I would love to see that because I think it would be a well worthwhile adventure in the city of Monterey.
What kind of pole?
It's just typically a pole, like a stop sign, but with a little plaque and historic site. And it would typically give the address and then sometimes a reference number so that you can look it up. But it's, to me, that's where we need to go to show history.
Most of the permits, including, I think, or this rezone includes a requirement for a bronze plaque.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
typically, it doesn't catch your eye when you're driving, like in some of the cities where they have these little poles, it's like a ribbon sign, but it catches your eye. You're not going to be looking down for a plaque on the ground. So
Mhm. Well, it certainly might be worth asking staff to go ahead and look at doing a register where you could easily find out where the historic homes are and then maybe some information about them that could go along with it.
Sure. Yes, and I believe the Mills Act program does require a marker identification. That's just not included in this packet because this hearing body just considers the rezoning. But we can definitely look into other options for identification. And then, as far as establishing a map of sorts. That shouldn't be hard because they all require the H1 and H2 zoning. So kind of already halfway there.
It's going to be really hard to put all the words that you may want to say about that property on that small plaque.
A lot of times it's a reference number
Or
Mhm.
QR
on the
code,
plaque.
Mhm.
or QR code.
Yeah.
Perhaps, yeah,
Yeah,
long term, we can maybe link it to the historic report that was prepared for the property. So there's some options there.
great, thanks. Any commissioner comments
In general,
in general?
I will start. A lot of people were upset about what happened last week. I'm probably a little bit more thick-skinned than most because of what I did.
Congratulations again, and thank you.
I made a comment to someone there that it's only 3 minutes. In California, that's what we would call a conspiracy, where a group of people to try to influence or make derogatory comments about our form of government. But in California, there has to be a felony before it can be chargeable. But bottom line is that it is an assault on the people there. It is an assault on our form of government, because I have always been a strong supporter for freedom of speech, to the point I don't like a 3-minute rule. But I thought that the mayor did a good job without a lot of previous thought, trying to channel the comments to that was on the agenda. The issue by having them have 3 minutes ahead of the meeting for items not on the agenda, but give the opportunity for freedom of speech. But I do want to applaud the mayor for his actions. And I assume that the city is going to be doing more on this. Because it was an assault on everybody there. And I don't like to use the N word with the N and a Z in it. I typically would find that repugnant. So there was a lot of things there, but we will get over it. That's the reason of my comment. Thank you.
I want to respond to that. I think the whole action regarding this coordinated effort was despicable, as everybody has pointed out. There's no question. I don't think any rational-minded person would think that. On the other hand, there is the issue of freedom of speech and the freedom of abhorrent speech. And that's the society that we happen to find ourselves in. Democracy is messy. However, I also think that the people who conducted themselves in such a disparaging way are cowards, racist cowards. Let them come up to the podium instead.
Mhm.
Oh, I had one other comment.
Oh, please.
Last time we asked about attendance to a training for commissioners. Any results on that?
Still looking into potential opportunities. I did bring the item up with Kim, Community Development Director Cole. So I hope to come back with some more specific opportunities. As I mentioned, the APA conference was last weekend. I did attend virtually. There weren't a lot of sessions geared towards planning commissioners, but we're definitely looking into that, and we'll come back with specific opportunities.
And I've been informed also there's regional meetings as well,
Specifically for planning commissioners?
for planners and planning
So-
commission.
Yeah, there are sub-regional chapters of the APA, so there are opportunities there as well. But yes, like to come back with more specific sessions geared towards planning commissioners. But happy to hear more if there's specific topics that you would like to receive training, or just more generalized. Like,
I
for
think-
instance, we can do,
I
there's,
think part of it, Levi, is that typically an item will come from the state and we're caught unaware of it. When it had been mentioned at some of these meetings. And so we're not blindsided all of a sudden when the law comes down, or sometimes just a policy. I information is always good.
Absolutely.
So if we could keep the commission informed of what is evolving, I think that would be a positive. But thank you.
Yeah, we'd be happy to. You make an excellent point. Our state legislature blesses us with a number of laws every year that touch on the field of planning. More recently, a lot to do with housing and then climate change as well and policies surrounding that. It's a lot for our staff to wrap our heads around year to year. So I can imagine, I can definitely appreciate the challenge that it presents this commission as well.
Harry?
I just wanted to make my 2 cents too. So I was shaken after this sort of really nasty experience on Tuesday. And it's funny here in Little Monterey, you know, we're a small city. We didn't, all of these comments that we had to suffer through had nothing to do with the item that was being heard. And evidently it's happening all over the state. It was on the front page of the Chronicle, San Francisco Chronicle yesterday. It's I don't know how many jurisdictions, 10 or 12 so far, but I don't know if we've seen the end of it yet. And definitely free speech is there, but you know, after a lot of thought about this, my end reaction is people have to vote.
Well, I'm gonna add my 2 cents, but it goes off in a little bit different direction. That was disgusting, what we had to sit through the other night. There was one person that was speaking that I could just feel the anger in his voice, which made me start thinking about, you know, how easy it is from someone to just call in and be angry and do something more than that, as evidenced by the gentleman that came bursting through the door in the last planning commission meeting I chaired. And it caused me to think about our safety in a public forum. Now, we lock that door now, and I think we should, and I think there should be some analysis of our safety in this building. I know on some classes I teach at the Naval Postgraduate School, we have active shooter training every year. And in the room that I'm working with, I have to show how I'm going to protect people if there is an active shooter. And there's nothing like that I've experienced here at the city. And I really think there's a gap there that needs to be looked at more closely. That door right there, it's a beautiful day. Of course it's open, but anytime that someone's coming in from the side, you have no chance to react and protect yourself. And if everybody was routed through that entry door down there, that might be a different story. I'm not a policeman. I just think that someone should be taking a look at this, because sometimes, like the other night, I really started thinking about, I'm not that confident in our safety in this forum. So I did mention that to Levi after that. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. I think just to mention to the members, I think there's a meeting coming up, City Council tomorrow, where this is on the agenda. So it might be worth bringing our 2 cents worth there as well, make our comments. I mean, clearly it was an unexpected and horrific experience. And to put it in perspective, my youngest daughter was with a friend at Crystal Fish. And believe it or not, they play our meetings at Crystal Fish on live TV.
I did not know that.
And so I would have been horrified if my daughter or her friends at school were watching that occur and how to explain it. So, I mean, it's really a tough situation where we find ourselves in public decorum and how we want to have that freedom of speech and also knowing where to draw the line. And I think, as you said, Tyler really did a pretty good job working to try to manage that situation on the cuff. So
Right.
I think we should be happy to not have been the first to go through it. And, you know, somebody there like Tyler was able to manage it in a way that I think was able to show the city off really very well.
Mhm.
So, so Levi, any comments?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, to stay on the topic that we've been discussing tonight, you know, I think the meeting was disrupted, and I think there was some confusion as to what the actual final action taken on the item was. So I did want to report back on that. They did table the item. It will be renoticed, brought back to get the formal feedback from the council. It was unfortunate. We were able to present the item, got a lot of valuable feedback from the planning commission. And then unfortunately, we weren't really able to come back after public comment to get the feedback from the council on the public comments received that were constructive and on topic. So that will happen at a later date. But did want to give the update that we have submitted the city's housing element draft to the state for review. So we are in compliance with her timeframe there. So to start that 90-day review period. Obviously, it is a draft document. So if the council comes back with significant revisions or anything based on the public comment received, we can still incorporate that into the plan. But did want to thank this commission for your attendance to that joint meeting and for the valuable feedback that you all provided. As Vice Chair Bluth mentioned, there is currently scheduled a meeting to consider the adoption of a governance policy at City Council tomorrow. There is rumblings that might be postponed due to absence of City Council members. Unfortunately, I don't have a firm update on that at this time, but if we receive one tomorrow, we'll definitely let you all know. Other than that, just wanted to let you know that we do have a couple items tentatively scheduled for the October 10th Planning Commission meeting, but we'll have an update for you on that if it's happening or not.
I have a silly question.
Sure.
Thinking about the property on the corner of Scott and Van Buren and Larkin. What is the city policy on small animals, ponies, chickens, sheep, goats, such a huge lot?
I don't know offhand what the policy is. I'm happy to look into that and come back to this
Thank you.
commission. Yeah. Specifically for large lots or just in general?
Particularly if it played a role in a historical
Exactly.
story or context.
I think you're allowed 3 chickens, 2 guinea pigs, and 1 rabbit,
Male
or
or
something like that.
male or female?
No
It is
roosters.
quantified in
Yeah.
code.
No, it's,
Yeah.
we have chickens at our house. My daughter's got a few. So the rule is 4 chickens. And they were told they could not have a goat. They could not have a sheep. So we did look into that. I'm not sure exactly what the ordinance is, but there is one that governs all that for the city of Monterey, and no roosters. You're not allowed to have a rooster in
Yeah.
Monterey.
That's
Yeah.
important.
We'll be happy to
Indeed.
come back with a
quick-
informal report on that.
Levi, the tabling by the city council, was that just because they ran out of time?
I think it was a combination of that and that the meeting had been considerably disrupted.
Okay.
Okay, why don't we end this meeting at 4:58? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.